Um, so where are we going to begin? Um, I'd like to start with the idea that a personality theory um, cannot accurately describe a person. We cannot know a person if we were just to simply take a series of photographs of this person. Or we could sense some things about this person from those photographs, perhaps from the activity they were doing or the mood that it seemed that they were in from the look of their face and so on. And these things are indeed a reflection of personality. But they are really not the person's personality per se. They are the combination of this person and who they are, and the situation that they're in, and the events that have happened immediately before and during the photograph. And this is a rather crude way to try and figure out who a person is. Well, so how do you do this? Some people, many people now with the internet, go online and they take personality tests. And unfortunately, each of those tests functions like a photograph in that they will ask you a single question. The question might be, would you prefer to read a book at home, or would you prefer to be out with friends on a Saturday night? Okay, and so they're roughly saying to you, do you prefer to be with people, or do you prefer to be introspective and in fact, do you like reading? Okay, but from a single question, that would be like you following a person around through the course of their life. Let's say the person is in their late 20s, and you were to follow them around for 10 years, and you were to film every moment of their waking life. Now, how would you determine if the person was going to be more comfortable out with people, or whether they would prefer to be home and read a book? Would you have to look at every minute of the film? Would you then break it down to individual frames, which amount to snapshots of their life? And would you then take these snapshots and mathematically tally them up in different ways, and would you divide them all into the ones with people and when the person's by themselves? Obviously, this would be a really inaccurate way of understanding who the person is. Unfortunately, every single personality theory attempts to know people by using these snapshots, these single frames of life. And even when the question is asked and the person is then advised, think of a number of times in these situations, or if on the test this situation, this quality in a personality is tested from many angles, say 5 or 10 different angles, still those 10 snapshots, those frames of life, are still single frames of life, and they're capturing what the person is like in a moment. Okay. So the basic problem with doing all this is that the persons, we change, how we appear, how we behave, etc., changes based on the situation, based on the time in our life, our age, our circumstances. Are we at work? Are we at home? Is there anybody to go out with on Saturday night? And that's why you're reading the book. Have you been invited out, but there's somebody there that you don't like? None of this is included in those questions on personality tests. So, not surprisingly, those personality tests can give us at best the gist of somebody, but really that's not their personality. They're just some very vague references that we can make to people. So is there a better way? And that's the big question, and that is partially what we are going to be exploring. A better way to measure who a person is. Who is this person? And at their core, at their essence, what makes them them? What makes them unique? And right up front, I want to say that this will not be focused on how people behave per se, but rather how people feel, what kind of urges the person feels inside in various situations, and to overcome the single frame of life problem and get this to be a more accurate generalization, we are going to be using something called tipping point based testing. And by that I mean we are going to divide personality into categories wherein they will be pairs of opposites. And so an example, and we'll come to this, will be when you feel needy, when you experience neediness, is your first urge to look outside yourself to find that source of that neediness, or inside yourself? Now, if you think about what I just raised, it's deceptively simple. But were you to do this simply by looking, okay, so if I am looking for the source of the solution to my neediness inside me, I will be looking at me. And if I am looking at the source of this neediness, or the solution to this neediness outside me, well, I will be looking out there at you, out there. Okay, so now if you sit and simply try to have parts of both, you will very quickly realize you can't. You can't be looking at me, yourself, and looking at others, you. You cannot be doing it partially there and partially here, although you could be changing kind of rapidly. But if you were changing rapidly, you wouldn't really be taking the measure of anything. You'd just really be moving your head. This is the basis of a personality theory which can actually measure people. You do this by singling out the qualities that are measurable and temporarily setting aside all those qualities which really can be chalked up to a lot of randomness, the situation, etc. The person themselves is the person regardless of the situation they're in. Even if their behavior changes, there are going to be tendencies, qualities, which come with the person regardless of where they are. This is what I am claiming is who the person is, their personality. Now, I've said a lot of things so far, and I just want to, before we go on, just briefly restate them. And the first thing is that the way that we assess who people are has a basic flaw in it, and the flaw is that we take snapshots, whether it's with a camera, whether it is with a question, or whether it is with a single meeting of a person. We take snapshots, and we tend to take that snapshot as the basis for judging who the person is, their personality. And the flaw in this is that it is simply a single point in time. It doesn't have a before, it doesn't have a during, it doesn't have an after. We don't know. And of course, you can take a photograph of a person in every possible state of mind, and those don't generalize to the whole person's personality. So the single frame of life, the single photograph, the snapshot problem exists in personality, and we're going to look at a way past it. And the second piece of what I mentioned is the tipping point based testing, a way to measure personality, wherein we set aside all of those qualities in a person which can't actually be measured in a way that generalize. They can be measured in a moment, but not generalize. And we simply focus on those qualities in human nature which can be looked at as a pair of complementary opposites, complete opposites, such as where am I looking physically? Am I looking at me, or am I looking at you? And that's a pair of opposites. And we can tip this because in any given amount of situations, we can generally see, okay, people generally look out, or people generally look in, and this is a literally observable, measurable quality in human nature. Okay, so we're going to next look at what do we measure? What are those qualities in human nature that we can measure versus those qualities which they aren't really measurable and then able to be generalized to the whole person? Okay.